Before we begin this story, let me know where you are listening from in the comments below.
My name is Emily Carter. I'm 27 years old. And what I'm about to tell you today will forever change the way you see your own family. I remember the way the ceiling lights at St. Mary's flickered, tiny, trembling halos above my head, just moments after Noah was born. My body was shaking, hollowed out, exhausted in a way no one warns you about. But I held him close, breathing in the faint, milky scent of his skin. For a second, when his fingers curled around mine, I felt something fragile but real spark inside me. "No matter what happens, you're everything to me," I whispered. And for a moment, I let myself believe I wasn't alone. Then the door opened. Daniel stepped in first. Immaculate suit, polished shoes, that familiar scent of cedarwood cologne, and behind him, like shadows trailing a man who believed he owned every room he entered, were Margaret and Chloe Hawthorne. Their eyes landed on me the way someone might glance at a stain on their favorite carpet. Daniel didn't smile. He didn't look at Noah. He didn't even look at me long enough to fake concern. Instead, his face tightened into a mask carved from cold marble. "What is this, Emily?" he asked, voice low but sharp. Before I could answer, he stepped closer to the foot of the bed and spoke, loudly enough for every nurse in the hallway to hear. "That child is not mine." The world snapped. Just snapped. No one moved. Not the nurses, not Margaret, not Chloe. No one even breathed. Daniel continued, "I'm not signing anything. I will not put my name on a birth certificate for a child that doesn't share my blood." For a moment, I couldn't feel my legs. I gripped the metal guardrail of the hospital bed so hard my knuckles burned white. My chest tightened, and I had to fight the urge to gasp for air. It was as if someone had ripped open my ribcage with their bare hands. "Daniel?" My voice cracked like thin glass. "Please don't do this. Please don't do this here." He didn't even blink. Margaret's lips curved into the smallest, calmest smile, polite, almost gentle. The kind of smile meant to slice rather than soothe. She leaned in toward her son, not breaking eye contact with me, and murmured, "Some women confuse financial access with intimacy, Daniel. She'll learn boundaries soon enough." Not a shout. Not a threat. Just a soft, poisonous whisper meant to lodge itself into my bones. Chloe rolled her eyes and tapped her phone, like she was bored with the spectacle. I could feel heat rising behind my eyes, but I refused to let the tears fall. Not in front of them. Not when I knew they were waiting for me to break. I lifted Noah closer, burying my cheek against his tiny head, inhaling him as if that would ground me. My hands were trembling so badly I worried I might drop him. Then the door opened again. Dr. Harris Mitchell entered with the subtle urgency of a man who'd seen too much, but never stopped caring. His expression, normally steady, shifted the moment he saw the tension in the room. "Mr. Hawthorne," he said, acknowledging Daniel. "Mrs. Carter, I need a moment of your time. Privately." Daniel scoffed. "Whatever you have to say, you can say in front of me. I'm not involved in this." The doctor's jaw tightened. "Actually, you may want to hear this." The quiet that followed was a different kind of quiet, thick enough to choke on. Dr. Mitchell looked at me with an expression that hollowed out my stomach. "There's something unusual in the baby's initial panel results," he said carefully. "Something that indicates a deeper issue within the family line. It's not simply a question of non-matching DNA." The room froze. "What does that mean?" I whispered, clutching Noah even tighter. Dr. Mitchell exhaled slowly, his eyes filled with a kind of gravity I'll never forget. "It means," he said, "that this situation may be far more complicated and far more concerning than anyone here realizes. And I need to discuss it with you alone, Emily." A cold wave rolled over my skin. My heart kicked against my ribs. Margaret straightened. Daniel's expression flickered, with confusion, then something like irritation, then something unreadable. And me? I felt the floor tilt beneath me. Was something wrong with Noah? Something serious? The terror surged so violently I almost dropped my breath. Dr. Mitchell took a step closer, lowering his voice. Emily, this isn't just a medical concern. What I found suggests there may be a deeper family-related anomaly that cannot be explained by simple non-paternity. The room spun. Behind Daniel's cold denial, behind Margaret's icy disdain, behind the humiliation burning through me, there was something darker, something wrong, something that tied back to the Hawthorne family in a way none of them expected. My throat tightened, and I nodded, unable to speak. I pressed Noah closer, feeling his warmth, terrified I might lose it. Daniel's voice cut through the air, brittle and sharp. We're leaving. Margaret brushed invisible dust off her sleeve. Chloe sighed, and the three of them walked out, closing the door behind them without a backward glance. The moment they left, Dr. Mitchell's calm facade slipped. Just a fraction. Just enough to frighten me in a whole new way. Emily, he said softly, we need to talk immediately. Because whatever happened, it goes beyond what you think. And in that instant, holding my newborn son, abandoned by the man I loved, shaking under the weight of words I didn't yet understand, I realized my life had just cracked open, and something terrible was about to spill out. I didn't sleep that night, not even for a second. I sat upright in the hospital bed, cradling Noah against my chest, listening to the slow, raspy rhythm of his breathing. Every inhale felt like a countdown I couldn't understand. Every exhale sounded thinner than the last. But what haunted me most wasn't his breathing. It was Dr. Harris Mitchell's face, that seriousness in his eyes, a heaviness of truth he was trying to ease me into. By morning, the sky outside the window had turned the color of faded steel. Nurses moved quietly through the hallways, pushing carts, whispering about shift changes. Somewhere down the corridor, a baby cried. Mine didn't. Noah lay quietly against me, too quiet. I didn't realize I was holding my breath until the door opened. Dr. Mitchell walked in with a folder pressed to his chest. His posture was steady, almost too steady. The kind you learn after decades of delivering both miracles and disasters to families who will never forget your face. Emily, he said gently, may I sit? I nodded, my throat tight. I'm sorry you had to go through what happened yesterday, he began. No mother deserves that, especially not right after giving birth. His voice was warm, but thinly stretched, like someone trying to lift a weight too heavy for one pair of hands. Doctor, what did you find? My fingers brushed over Noah's tiny back. Please don't hide anything from me. He opened the file. First, he said carefully, you should know that the preliminary DNA panel came back, and it's consistent. I swallowed. Consistent with what Daniel said? He shook his head slowly. No, it's consistent in a way that makes very little medical sense. My pulse stuttered. The baby's chromosomal markers don't match Daniel, he said, but they also don't match yours. For a moment, my brain refused to process the sentence. It bent, twisted, distorted in the air. That's impossible. My voice trembled. I carried this child. He was inside me. I felt him kick. Doctor, that's not possible. I know, he said softly. Which is why I'm concerned there may be a deeper issue. Something related to mitochondrial inheritance or intentional tampering. The room spun. I tightened my hold on Noah to steady myself. Intentional. Tampering. Words that tasted like metal and fear. Emily, he continued, have you ever lost time, experienced disorientation, felt as if something happened to you, but you couldn't fully remember it? My breath faltered. There it was. The memory I'd been trying to drown, bury, suffocate. A night weeks earlier. A strange dizziness. A pressure in my chest. A shadowed figure in a room that wasn't fully dark but somehow felt like a nightmare anyway. A face. Not clear, but close enough to make my stomach twist. I don't know, I whispered. I thought it was a dream. I thought maybe I was just overtired. His eyes softened with sorrow. Emily, I think something happened. Something before the pregnancy became noticeable. Something you couldn't consent to. And something you're only beginning to remember. A wave of nausea surged up my throat. Behind Daniel's public humiliation, behind Margaret's cold disdain, behind the Hawthorne family's obsession with image, there had always been something more. Something wrong. "Doctor," I asked, voice thin as tissue, "are you saying someone did something to me?" He didn't answer right away. That silence told me everything. "We need to run more advanced genetic tests," he finally said, quietly, discreetly, "and you need to consider your safety." Safety. The word lodged itself in my ribs like a shard of glass. Before I could respond, the door swung open. Daniel's voice filled the room like a sudden blast of icy air. "I'm here for the final discharge paperwork." He didn't look at Noah. Didn't look at me. He looked at Dr. Mitchell, as if he were an annoyance, a fly buzzing too close to his well-polished world. "There's nothing more to discuss," Daniel said. "You keep your medical results. We'll handle our end." Dr. Mitchell stood, calm but firm. "Mr. Hawthorne, this is serious. There are implications far beyond paternity." Daniel raised a hand sharply. "I'm not interested." Margaret stepped into view behind him, adjusting her pearl earring as if this were a brunch reservation she didn't want to miss. She lowered her voice to me, soft as a needle sliding under skin. "Some women," she murmured, "misinterpret kindness for opportunity. Best you learn to respect privacy and wealth." And just like that, they turned and walked out. Not a backward glance, not a word for Noah. Not a sound except their expensive shoes tapping against the tile floor. When the door closed, Dr. Mitchell exhaled hard. "I'm so sorry," he said. I nodded, unable to speak. My lips trembled around the words I couldn't form. "Emily," he said gently, "you're not imagining this, and you're not alone. But you must tell me if anything unusual happened in the weeks before you found out you were pregnant." I looked down at my son, and that's when the memory hit me, sharp and sudden. A distorted room, a blurred face leaning too close, a hand on my shoulder, the sound of something heavy closing, my own voice trying to scream but fading into a void. I gasped, clutching the blankets. I remember something," I whispered. "Not clearly, but I remember being afraid." He nodded, compassion darkening his eyes. "That's the beginning," Dr. Mitchell said softly. "Your mind protects you until it's safe, but the truth always leaks through." My heart hammered in my chest. "What do I do now?" I asked. "You survive," he said, "and you prepare yourself, because whatever happened, whatever this family is hiding, it's deeper than you think." His words hung in the air like smoke, dense and suffocating. And as I pressed my lips to Noah's forehead, trying to steady my shaking hands, I realized the truth. This wasn't just a betrayal. It wasn't just humiliation. It wasn't even just about Daniel. Something dark had happened to me. Something monstrous. And I had only begun to remember. Leaving St. Mary's felt like stepping out of a world that no longer wanted me. The hospital doors slid open with a soft sigh, as if relieved to send me away. Heat surged toward me, thick, heavy, humid, wrapping around my sore body until every stitch along my abdomen pulsed with pain. I held Noah's car seat with both hands, though my fingers trembled so badly I had to pause twice on the ramp. My legs felt rubbery, swollen, barely attached to me. I'd imagined leaving the hospital in a car Daniel drove, imagined his hand on my back, imagined his quiet whisper telling me we'd figure everything out. Instead, I walked alone, carrying my son and the sting of humiliation stitched into my skin deeper than the surgical sutures. The rideshare driver pulled up without making eye contact. He didn't offer help with the car seat, didn't ask if I was okay. When I told him the address, he finally looked at me through the rearview mirror. Third ward? Yes. A beat of silence, then a shrug. Seatbelt in the back is sticky, you might have to wiggle it. I fumbled with the buckle while Noah whimpered. My fingers shook, and for a moment I thought I might drop the whole seat. When I finally clicked the buckle in place, a wave of dizziness washed over me. I leaned my head back, letting the cool air conditioning brush my face as we pulled away. Through the window, the world changed block by block. Medical campus, uptown stores, then older homes, faded paint, corner lots with rusted fences. Each mile felt like falling backward into a life I thought I'd outgrown. By the time we reached my old building, my chest felt tight. The structure sagged like a weary giant, paint peeling, windows fogged, a warped wooden railing I used to grip whenever the world felt too big. Now I had to grip it again, this time with a newborn and no safety net. Inside the hallway, the air was cooler but damp, carrying the familiar scent of mildew mixed with someone's burnt toast. I pushed open my apartment door and stepped into the life I'd left behind. Everything was exactly as I remembered, only smaller, darker, and sadder. Dust lay thick over the coffee table. The couch cushion still sagged to one side. The blinds hung unevenly, letting in a narrow slice of harsh daylight that illuminated the mess I'd abandoned months earlier. The soft dripping of a pipe in the bathroom echoed rhythmically, like a ticking clock reminding me that every second from here on would be harder. I set Noah's car seat on the floor and stood still. For a moment, I didn't feel like a mother. I didn't feel like a wife. I felt like a ghost drifting through the ruins of a life I'd tried so hard to leave behind. My eyes prickled. My throat thickened. The urge to crumble surged through me, heavy and sudden. But then Noah made a soft, breathy coo, a tiny fluttering sound that tugged me back into my body. I knelt down, slowly, painfully, and stroked his tiny fist. "We're okay," I whispered. "I don't know how yet, but we are." I pushed myself upright and forced my hands to move. I cleared a small space near the window, dragged the table aside, wiped dust from the floor with the corner of my shirt, shook out the old baby blanket I kept just in case. My arms trembled, but I made a little nest for him, something warm amid the cold. I had just placed Noah down when a knock startled me. Soft, steady, familiar. My heart jumped. I opened the door a few inches. "Emily, sweetheart," Mrs. Bernice Walker said, her voice warm like sunlight after rain. "Is that you finally home?" Her presence filled the doorway, gray hair wrapped in a colorful scarf, floral house dress, deep smile lines, and eyes that saw straight through the masks people wore. She held a covered Pyrex dish in both hands, steam fogging up the lid. "Bernice," my voice cracked. "Lord have mercy, come let me in," she said, brushing past me gently. "You look like you're held together with tape and hope." She saw Noah and immediately knelt beside him, lowering herself with careful effort. Her breath softened. "Oh my goodness," she whispered. "Look at this perfect little angel. Aren't you handsome?" Noah blinked up at her, grunting softly. It was such a small sound, but it broke something open inside me. I covered my mouth with one hand to hold back the sob threatening to escape. Bernice noticed instantly. She reached up and took my hand, warm, steady, grounding. "Don't swallow it down," she murmured. You've been holding yourself together since before you walked through that door." Her kindness melted me. My tears fell, slow at first, then faster. My shoulders shook. I wasn't crying for Daniel anymore. I wasn't crying for the money he cut off, or for the humiliation in the hospital, or even the fear clawing at me from the doctor's warning. I was crying because someone finally looked at me with softness. Bernice held my hand firmly. "New mama, no support, no money, but you got heart, and you got that baby. That's more than some of them rich folks downtown can say." I let out a shaky laugh through the tears. She smiled. "I brought dinner," she said, uncovering the dish. "Chicken, rice, greens. A woman can't heal on crackers." "Thank you," I whispered. "I'll bring more tomorrow," she said matter-of-factly. "And before you argue, don't. I raised 6 kids with less than you got here. I know when someone needs help." She stepped toward the door, then turned, her expression shifting into something deeper, wiser. "Emily," she said quietly, "people with money hide the biggest sins. Their houses ain't big 'cause they need space. They're big 'cause secrets echo." Her words slid under my skin like cold lightning. "But truth?" She shook her head. "Truth's stubborn. It don't stay buried, no matter how much dirt folks throw on it." After she left, the apartment felt different. Still small, still cracked, but no longer empty. I walked to the kitchen to warm the food when... Shh. A soft sound near the door. I froze, turned slowly. A folded piece of lined paper lay half-pushed under the door. My stomach tightened. I picked it up with trembling fingers and unfolded it. The handwriting was jagged, rushed, slanted. "He wasn't the only one in that house who looked at you differently." The room tilted. "Not the only one." Instantly, memories flashed. Too quickly to fully grasp. Footsteps behind me in dark hallways, doors that closed softly when I turned, a gaze that lingered a beat too long, whispered conversations that stopped the moment I entered a room, things I had dismissed, ignored, excused. My breath caught. Who wrote this? How did they know? And what did they see that I didn't? I looked at Noah, small, warm, helpless. My pulse hammered in my ears. Something happened to me, something monstrous. And this note was the first crack in the hawthorn wall of silence. Whatever truth waited behind it. It wasn't done with me. Not yet. I didn't know what was happening inside the Hawthorne estate that morning, but I could feel it. An invisible tremor running through the city, like the air had shifted. Secrets that had slept for years were beginning to stir. And though I was miles away in my tiny apartment in 3rd Ward, holding Noah against my chest, I felt the storm forming in that mansion of polished lies. While Noah slept, I tried to breathe through the ache in my body and the fear coiling in my stomach. The note from the night before sat on the counter, its words burned into my mind. He wasn't the only one in that house who looked at you differently. Whoever wrote it knew something. Something I had sensed but never understood. Something the Hawthorns desperately needed to keep buried. And somewhere across Houston, panic was blooming inside River Oaks. I wasn't there to witness it, but after everything I'd experienced in that house, the rigid tension, the unspoken rules, the sharp looks that sliced instead of softened, I could easily imagine how it unfolded. Later, Daniel would confirm details to Maya, but even before hearing his version, I could picture it with painful clarity. The morning light would spill into the Hawthorne dining room, catching on the polished silver and the enormous chandelier. Margaret would sit at the head of the long mahogany table, palms folded with stiff elegance. Her pearls would rest perfectly against her throat, as though even gravity bowed to her discipline. Daniel would stand near the window, jaw clenched, pacing. He had inherited his father's height, but none of his ease with cruelty. I used to think that made him the safer Hawthorne. Now I wasn't sure. Margaret's tone would be icy. Daniel, hospitals make mistakes. DNA tests can be mishandled. Daniel's laugh, sharp, humorless, would cut across the room. This isn't a mistake, Mother. The baby doesn't match me, but it also doesn't match Emily. Explain that. He would be unraveling, and Margaret, queen of composure, would try to maintain control. Emily is manipulating you, she would say, almost gently. That girl was drowning when you found her. She needed saving, and she used you. The word girl would stab him more deeply than she realized. Chloe, sitting at the far end of the table scrolling through her phone, would chime in. You always had a weakness for lost causes. Daniel would slam his palm on the table so hard the glassware rattled. This isn't about her. This is about the fact that something happened. Something bigger than any of you want to admit. The room would freeze. Margaret's smile, tight, brittle, would finally crack. Watch your tone, she would snap. We do not raise our voices in this house. Daniel would look at her with a fury I had seen only once before, the night he told me he hated becoming his father. We need a full panel, he would say. Every male relative tested. Today. And that was the sentence that would shatter the Hawthorne calm. Chloe would shift uncomfortably. Margaret's hand would grip her pearls. A soft gasp might escape one of the maids in the hallway. And then, Evan. Daniel's younger brother, the quiet shadow trailing behind family dinners and charity galas. Always pale, always anxious, always watching. He would appear at the doorway, eyes wide. Mother, he would whisper, is this about Ava Collins? The name would fall like a stone into a black lake, a ripple of dread, a held breath, a truth no one dared to speak. Margaret's back would go rigid. You will not bring up that name, she would hiss, but the silence afterward would expose something jagged and real. Daniel would turn toward his mother slowly. What happened to Ava? He would demand. You never let us talk about her again. Why? A pause, a tightening of lips, a shadow behind Margaret's eyes. Before she could answer, the voice that had ruled the Hawthorne legacy for decades would echo through the dining room doorway. Enough. Charles Hawthorne had returned home. The air would shift instantly, fear tightening the room like a noose. Charles would step inside wearing the calm of a man who believed he controlled every outcome. His stare alone could silence grown men. I remembered that stare. Cold, surgical. A look that said he'd evaluated your worth long before you opened your mouth. You're embarrassing yourself, Daniel, Charles would say. And this family. You're the one embarrassing this family, Daniel would snap, braver, angrier than anyone expected. Something happened, something you know about. Charles would pour himself scotch, unbothered. Emily Carter means nothing, he would say flatly. She always did. That line would break something inside Daniel. The realization that his father's cruelty wasn't limited to outsiders. It had shaped all of them. And Evan, trembling in the corner, would whisper, Dad, did you hurt Ava? Did you do something to her? Margaret's breath would catch. Her fingers would claw lightly at her pearls. The first sign of real fear I'd ever imagine on her. Charles's eyes would flick toward her just long enough to confirm everything Evan feared. He wouldn't answer with words. He didn't need to. His silence was confession enough. Margaret would turn away, her face pale, haunted. She had known. She had lived with this truth buried so long that she had become part of the soil that kept it hidden. Daniel's voice would break. Oh my God, he would breathe. All this time? Charles would take a slow sip of scotch. Handle it quietly or don't come back. That was the Hawthorne method of survival. Ignore, bury, threaten, continue. But this time, their cycle had cracked. I didn't know the words exchanged next, But I knew the shift. Daniel's loyalty fractured. Evan's fears awakened. Margaret's composure splintered. And Charles's empire, long protected by silence, began to tremble at its foundation. Back in my apartment, I held Noah, unaware of the full scale of the implosion unfolding across town, but I felt it. Like a pressure drop before a storm. The Hawthorns were panicking. The truth was clawing its way out. And whatever happened next would drag all of us into the light, whether we were ready or not. I woke up to silence. Not peaceful silence. Unnatural silence. Noah wasn't crying, wasn't wriggling, wasn't even fussing the way newborns do when they sense their mother waking. He lay next to me on the blanket, still as a feather caught in place. "Noah," I whispered. His eyelids fluttered but didn't open. His breathing was shallow, a fragile rise and fall that felt wrong in my bones. When I placed my hand on his forehead, his skin felt cool, like he was slipping away from warmth itself. A cold, electric fear shot through my body. I lifted him carefully, feeling how light he was. Too light. His tiny chest trembled with each breath. I remembered Dr. Mitchell's words. A deeper issue. A family line anomaly. Not simple non-matching DNA. My stomach twisted. I dialed the pediatric hotline, praying, "Please answer. Please help him." But instead of a nurse, a clipped robotic voice informed me my insurance had been canceled. Terminated. Effective immediately. Daniel's final blow. I stood there frozen, Noah in my arms, the world tilting around me. Then instinct pushed me forward. I wrapped him tighter and rushed to the nearest community clinic. The receptionist didn't raise her head when she said, "Earliest appointment is in 3 weeks." 3 weeks? My child could barely breathe. I stumbled home, every step heavy, my throat burning with helplessness. When I set Noah down, his chest barely moved at all. Panic surged so violently I felt faint. Without thinking, I did what my mother used to do when my world was falling apart. I started humming her lullaby, soft, steady. A tiny prayer disguised as a melody. Noah twitched, a flicker of movement. Not much, but enough to keep me from collapsing. "I'm here, baby," I whispered. "I'll fight for you, I swear." I grabbed my old laptop. The screen flickered, froze twice, but I kept searching. Pro bono lawyer, financial abuse help, free medical legal advocacy. Then I found her, Maya Rodriguez, attorney, specializing in family injustice and power-based abuse. Her tagline read, "I fight for women no one else will fight for." I emailed her, then messaged, then called. My voice shook in the voicemail. She called back 20 minutes later. "Emily, I read your message. Tell me what happened." The steadiness in her voice felt like someone handing me a lifeline. I told her everything. Noah's breathing, the canceled insurance, the unanswered questions about his DNA, and the night that haunted me in flashes. "When can you come in?" she asked. "I can't," I whispered. "I don't have a car, I don't have—" "I'll come to you," she said immediately. "Text me your address." When she arrived, she filled my dim apartment with an air of competence sharp as steel. She took one look at Noah and her expression changed, softened, but with a shadow of concern. "This isn't normal," she said. "His breathing is too weak." I tried to get help. Tears stung my eyes. They canceled everything. "That's financial abuse," she said, "and it becomes criminal when it endangers a child." Hope sparked, small but real. I told her about the night, my blurred memory, the feeling of being restrained in my own body. Her jaw tightened. "Emily, that sounds like drug-facilitated assault." The room spun. I gripped the back of the couch to stay upright. "No, I'm not sure." "You're not supposed to be sure," she said gently. "That's how these crimes work." She proposed a private full DNA panel, far more advanced than the hospital's test. Something that could reveal hidden generational markers, something that could expose the truth. I knew it would cost money I didn't have. So I went to the drawer beside my bed and pulled out the only thing of value I had left. The cheap wedding ring Daniel had temporarily given me. "Use this," I said, placing it in her hand. "I need to contribute." She studied me for a long second before nodding. "If this makes you feel part of the fight, then yes." She swabbed Noah's cheek and sealed the sample with careful hands. "I'll rush it," she promised. "Expect a call soon." Then she left. The hours afterward felt endless. Noah's breathing grew weaker. His eyelids fluttered like he was fighting to stay in this world. I held him close, rocking him gently, humming the lullaby until my voice grew hoarse. When the phone finally rang, I answered before the first vibration finished. "Emily," Maya said, breathless, "sit down." I sank onto the couch, clutching Noah. "I have the first results," she continued, "and they're concerning." My pulse pounded in my ears. "The test confirms Noah is not Daniel's," she said, "but he does match someone from the Hawthorne family." A cold wave washed over me. "Who?" My voice barely escaped. Maya inhaled slowly. "The markers point to a male relative, but not someone near Daniel's age. Not near his age. Not Daniel. Not Evan. Not any cousin." My entire body went numb as the truth formed on its own. There was only one older male in that house. Only one man with power. With control. With a history buried so deeply the walls themselves must have been holding their breath. Maya's voice dropped to a whisper. "Emily, the DNA is consistent with Charles Hawthorne." The room faded. The edges of my vision blurred. I held Noah so tightly I could feel his heartbeat against my palm. Charles. Daniel's father. The man who had barely looked at me but somehow made me shiver every time he entered a room. Now I understood why. The truth wasn't just dark, it was monstrous. And it had finally found its way to the surface. There are moments when the world doesn't simply change, it cleaves open. When Maya said Noah's DNA pointed to someone older in the Hawthorne family, the entire room seemed to tilt. I held Noah tighter, feeling the fragile rise of his chest against mine. "Emily," Maya said through the phone, "I'll confirm with a second test. But the markers, they point to Charles. Charles Hawthorne, the man who barely spoke, yet filled every room with silent dominance. The man whose eyes had always lingered too long, though I'd convinced myself I imagined it. A cold clarity washed over me. "What do I do?" I whispered. "Not confront him," she said firmly. "Not yet. Stay safe. I'll call with more." But safety felt like a foreign language. All night I sat awake, rocking Noah as his breathing wavered. And slowly, memory shards began to surface, disconnected images from that night months ago. A weight pinning my limbs, the smell of expensive cologne, a voice too low and too calm, something brushing my hair back. I remembered fear flooding me before everything went black. I had buried these pieces to survive. Now they clawed their way back. By morning, a quiet resolve had replaced the fear. I needed answers, real ones. I needed someone inside the Hawthorne house to speak. So I went there. Approaching the Hawthorne estate felt like approaching the scene of a crime. The iron gate loomed taller than I remembered. The stone path curved toward the front door like an accusation. I pushed Noah in his stroller, each squeak of the wheels sounding too loud in the manicured silence. Margaret opened the door. For a moment she simply stared, her knuckles whitening on the brass handle. "Emily," she breathed, voice tight. "You shouldn't be here. I need to talk to you." She hesitated, long enough for guilt to flicker across her face, then stepped aside. Inside, the air felt colder than the marble floors. I rolled Noah's stroller into the sitting room. Margaret stood by the fireplace, poised as ever, but something about her posture was off. Too rigid, too defensive. "What do you want?" she asked. "The truth," I said. Her jaw tightened. "Truth is messy. It destroys people. Then let it destroy whoever deserves it." For the first time since I'd known her, she looked away first. "What do you think you know?" she asked quietly. "Not think," I said. "I know. It's Charles." She inhaled sharply. The color drained from her cheeks. She sank slowly onto the edge of a chair as though her bones refused to hold her upright. "You don't understand," she whispered. "Then help me understand." Silence stretched between us until it trembled. And then, finally, Margaret spoke in a shaking voice I barely recognized. "Charles did things. Years ago. Long before you came here." She clasped her trembling hands together. "It started with a girl, Ava Collins." The name echoed inside me like a struck bell. That name had floated around the edges of my life with Daniel, mentioned once by accident, then swallowed by tension. Now it clicked into place like a hidden door swinging open. Margaret continued, each word sounding ripped from a wound. "Ava came here to help with charity work. She was sweet, gentle, too trusting. Charles took advantage of her. When she tried to speak, he sent her away, institutionalized her." My breath caught. "She's alive?" Margaret nodded, pain clouding her eyes, but not well, and not by choice. I felt heat rise behind my eyes, anger, grief, and a grief so deep it almost felt like drowning. "You let him do this," I said quietly. "You let him hurt her." "I was afraid," she whispered. "Afraid of him. Afraid of losing everything." I convinced myself silence was safer. "For who?" I demanded. "Not for Ava, not for me." Her tears spilled then, quiet, desperate tears of a woman realizing too late what her obedience had cost. "Emily," she said, voice cracking, "I tried to protect you when I realized you were pregnant. But by then, he'd already—" I lifted a hand sharply. "Don't say it." The truth was already carved into me. I didn't need to hear the word. I steadied my breath. "Where is Ava?" Margaret hesitated, but when she saw the expression on my face, unmoving, unshaken, she nodded. "A private psychiatric facility, outside the city. Charles pays for her silence." A pulse of fury surged under my skin. Not wild, not loud, but controlled, cold and steady, the kind that makes a person unstoppable. "I want the address." Margaret's voice broke. "Emily, if you confront him, he will destroy you." I shook my head. "He already tried." She looked at Noah then, really looked at him, for the first time. Her lips trembled. "He opens his eyes like Charles," she whispered. "But he's innocent. He never asked for any of this." "No," I said softly, brushing Noah's cheek. "And that's exactly why I'm doing this." Margaret closed her eyes in defeat. "I'll text you the address." Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. Maya Rodriguez. "Call me. Now." My heart leapt into my throat. I answered immediately. "Maya." Her voice was tense. "Emily, something new just came in." "What?" "An audio recording. Anonymous source. And Daniel received the same file." My stomach tightened. "What's on it?" Maya exhaled shakily. "It's a recording of a woman. She's crying, begging, talking about being locked away." My blood chilled. "Maya, who is it?" "Ava," she whispered. "It's Ava, Emily." The room spun. Margaret covered her mouth with both hands, her shoulders trembling. "And there's one more thing," Maya added. "In the recording, she says his name." My voice barely escaped. "Whose?" Maya didn't pause. "Charles Hawthorne." The world stilled. Noah whimpered softly. Margaret shook as though the truth were tearing her apart. The silence that followed wasn't emptiness. It was the sound of a legacy cracking open. Ava's voice had returned, and she wasn't whispering anymore. The audio file arrived just after dawn. No name, no warning, just a cold vibration on my nightstand that cut through the fragile quiet of my apartment. Noah slept curled against my chest, his breathing shallow but steady enough to keep me from breaking completely. I tapped the notification. Audio file received. Sender. Unknown. A chill ran through me. I pressed play. A woman's sobs filled the silence. Raw, shaking, desperate. Please. I didn't lie. I didn't lie. Please don't send me back. My heartbeat staggered. Ava. Even though I'd never heard her voice, something in me knew instantly. There was a trembling innocence to her words, a shattered edge that only comes from long-term terror. He said he could fix it. He said no one would believe me. My stomach tightened. Then the voice shifted. Lower, terrified, struggling through tears. Charles. Please, Charles. Don't. The audio cut off abruptly. I didn't breathe for several seconds. My fingers trembled so violently I nearly dropped the phone. Noah stirred, sensing the tension. I held him closer, grounding myself in the rhythm of his tiny heartbeat. Before I could process what I had just heard, my phone buzzed again. Daniel Hawthorne is calling. I stared at the screen, frozen. I hadn't spoken to him since the hospital, the moment he'd ripped my dignity apart in front of strangers. But something told me this wasn't a call I could ignore. I answered. His voice was wrecked. Emily, did you get the recording? Yes. A shaky exhale. I didn't know. I swear, I didn't know what he did. I didn't reply. I couldn't offer him comfort. But I heard something new in his tone. Horror, disbelief, the shattering of a lifetime of denial. She's alive, he murmured. Ava, she's really alive. Yes, I said softly, and terrified. A long silence passed between us. Then Daniel said something I didn't expect. I sent everything I had to Maya. The audio, old messages, suspicious transactions. Everything. I'm not protecting him. The shift in his voice wasn't small. It was tectonic. His loyalty had cracked. Emily, he whispered, I'm so sorry. I swallowed hard. This isn't about your apology. It's about what happens next. I know, he said, and I'm ready. Before I could answer, another call came in. Daniel, I'll call you back, I said quickly and switched lines. Maya? Her voice was electric with urgency. Emily, more women are coming forward. My pulse lurched. What? I've already received 3 emails this morning. 1 from 10 years ago. 1 from 5. 1 from a year before you met Daniel. All describing similar patterns. Bile rose in my throat. And they all mention Charles. Maya added softly. Some directly. Some in coded language. He didn't hide his crimes. He hid them. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of Noah's small body against me. Emily, Maya said gently, your case is no longer isolated. It's the beginning of something big. The air felt thicker, heavy, charged. What do you need from me? Just one thing, she said. Stay strong and be ready. Because when men like Charles fall, they try to take everything down with them. Later that afternoon, I met Daniel at a quiet public park. Maya insisted on public space for safety. The sun filtered through the branches above us, casting broken patches of light on the ground. Daniel stood waiting near a bench, shoulders slumped, eyes rimmed red. He looked nothing like the man who had once walked through life with arrogant certainty. I listened to the recording, he said as I approached, over and over. I can't get her voice out of my head. He swallowed hard, his jaw trembling. I confronted him, he whispered. My breath hitched. What did he say? He didn't deny anything, Daniel said, bitterness slicing through his voice. He just told me I was being emotional. That these things happen. His face twisted. Like Ava was nothing. Like you were nothing. He admitted it? He didn't have to say the words, Daniel replied. His silence was enough. He rubbed a hand over his face, shaking. I grew up thinking he was strict, demanding. I never imagined he was... His voice cracked. A predator. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Finally, Daniel lifted his eyes to mine. I'm helping Maya build the case, he said. I don't care if it destroys the Hawthorne name. It deserves to be destroyed. A strange mix of sorrow and respect flickered inside me. He wasn't the man who had humiliated me in the hospital anymore. He was a son realizing the truth about his father and choosing to fight it. This isn't about redemption, I said quietly. No, he replied, voice steady. It's about justice. He took a shaky breath. And Emily, when this goes public, more voices will come forward. Ava won't be alone. A wind swept through the trees, scattering leaves like whispered confessions around us. Noah stirred in his stroller, a soft sound that pulled both our gazes downward. Daniel looked at him with something indescribable, pain, guilt, but also a fierce protectiveness I hadn't seen before. He deserved better, Daniel said, voice breaking. You did too. I nodded, unsure what to say, unsure what forgiveness even meant anymore. But one thing was clear. Ava's voice had cracked open the silence. And now, others were stepping out of the shadows. Women who had been told to stay quiet. Women who had been buried under money and manipulation. Their voices didn't whisper anymore. They gathered, strengthened, echoed. And together they formed something powerful enough to rattle the foundations of the Hawthorne Empire. I looked at Noah, then at Daniel, then at the sky. Soft, pale, open. The truth is coming, I whispered. And this time, it won't be silenced. There are nights that feel like they're stitched together with dread. Every sound too sharp, every breath too fragile. The night Daniel came to my apartment was exactly that kind of night. Noah had just fallen asleep after hours of strained, uneven breathing. I held him against my chest, humming until my throat felt raw. The apartment was quiet except for the soft hum of the AC. I had just laid him in the bassinet when a knock hit the door. Not polite, not hesitant, urgent. My heart jumped into my throat. I looked through the peephole and froze. Daniel, soaked from rain, hair plastered to his forehead, eyes hollow and exhausted like someone who had run from something he could no longer bear. I opened the door a few inches. His voice cracked. Emily, please. I stepped aside. He came in slowly, like a man weighed down by his own bones. His gaze went straight to Noah, and for a moment, everything else fell away. Is he okay? He whispered. He's holding on. Daniel nodded once, as if that single word shattered him. Can I hold him? I paused. My instinct was to shield Noah from anything Hawthorne. But something in Daniel's face, the sheer devastation, made me nod. He took Noah with trembling hands, cradling him as if he'd never held anything more precious. I'm sorry, he whispered, voice breaking. I'm so sorry, little man. A tear dropped onto Noah's blanket. It was the first time I'd ever seen Daniel cry. I stood there quietly, letting the moment unfold. Finally, he looked at me. I confronted him. I didn't need clarification. Charles. Daniel nodded, jaw tight. I played the recording. All of it. My chest tightened. What did he say? He didn't deny it, Daniel said bitterly. He didn't even look ashamed. He just stared at me like I was being dramatic. I felt something cold crawl along my spine. That was exactly the Charles I remembered. Calm in the way predators were calm. I told him I was done protecting him, Daniel continued, voice trembling. And he said Hawthorne men who betray their blood don't survive in this world. My breath stilled. A threat. A warning. Maybe even a confession. What did you do? I whispered. I walked away. Daniel swallowed hard. For the first time in my life, I walked away from him. He gently laid Noah back into the bassinet before facing me fully. I need to say something, he said, and I know I don't deserve the chance. I crossed my arms but listened. I failed you, he said. At the hospital, in our marriage, in everything. But I'm not who he made me anymore. I refuse to be. I didn't speak, he continued, voice breaking. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just want to do right. From this moment forward. What does right look like to you? I asked quietly. Daniel didn't hesitate. I'm selling my Hawthorne shares. I blinked. Your entire inheritance? It goes into a private fund under Noah's name, he said. He'll have what he needs. Treatment, surgeries, whatever the future brings. I can't change the past, but I can make sure he survives the damage my family caused. For a moment I couldn't speak. I had never expected this from him. Not repentance, not responsibility, not sacrifice. But this wasn't redemption. It was transformation. The next morning, Noah's condition worsened again. His breathing dipped into panicked little gasps. His limbs jerked in unsettling spasms. I rushed him to urgent care, heart pounding, but every test was tangled in insurance complications, delayed approvals, and paperwork that felt endless. Hours passed. Noah whimpered weakly, my nerves frayed to the edge. When we finally made it home, desperation crawled up my spine. So I recorded a video. No makeup, no filters, just truth. My son is sick, I said, voice trembling. I'm not asking for money for myself. I'm asking for a chance for him to breathe. I posted it. I expected silence. Instead, within minutes, Bernice shared it. Then my old neighbors. Then strangers. Donations trickled in. $5, $10, $50. They came with messages. You're not alone. We're praying for Noah. Stay strong, Mama. For the first time in weeks, hope glowed faintly inside me. When I told Daniel, he just murmured, I'll cover whatever's left. And I believed him. The man before me was not the man I once feared. He was, finally, becoming Noah's father. Not by blood, but by choice. That evening, while I rocked Noah in the dim light of the living room, my phone rang again. Maya. Her tone was sharp, urgent, a warning wrapped in professionalism. Emily, listen carefully, she said. Charles is missing. My body went rigid. What do you mean missing? He left the estate 2 days ago, never checked into any property, no credit card activity. His phone is off. CCTV footage at the Hawthorne home was wiped clean. The air thinned around me. Maya, is he running? Yes, she said. He's running. And men like him only run when they know the truth is closing in. I felt the world tilt. A monster unhinged was more dangerous than one pretending to be civilized. I looked down at Noah, my fragile, innocent boy. I pulled him close and whispered, I've got you, baby, no matter what comes next. Because the breaking point wasn't just Daniel's. It was all of ours. And now the man who caused all this, the man whose darkness started everything, was loose and desperate. Monsters don't fall suddenly. They rot first, quietly, secretly, until one day the world finally smells the truth. Charles Hawthorne's fall began the moment he ran. News didn't break immediately. Maya told me they were tracking him quietly, working with investigators who specialized in high-profile disappearances, which was just another way of saying, rich men who think they're untouchable. But monsters always underestimate the women they hurt, especially when those women finally have a voice. The day the public found out, I was in the hospital cafeteria, sitting at a corner table with a cup of bitter coffee I couldn't afford. Noah was upstairs in the pediatric unit, prepped for emergency surgery his tiny body desperately needed. The community donations had covered half. Daniel had quietly paid the rest. My phone buzzed non-stop with notifications, but I ignored them. My entire world was the small crib upstairs, the IV line taped to Noah's fragile arm, the steady beep that told me he was still here. Then Maya called. "Emily, turn on the news." My stomach tightened. "What's happening?" "Just turn it on, you need to see this." I found a TV mounted above the coffee machine. A small crowd had already gathered, murmuring in low, stunned voices. On the screen, a journalist stood in front of an airport terminal, hair whipping in the wind. "Breaking news! Charles Hawthorne, Houston oil heir and philanthropist, was arrested minutes ago attempting to flee the country using a falsified passport." The image cut to shaky footage, grainy but unmistakable. Charles being shoved into handcuffs, his face twisted in fury, not fear. Rage. The kind of rage only men who believe they own the world feel when the world finally says no. The reporter continued. "Federal agents tell us Hawthorne was intercepted moments before boarding a private jet registered under a shell corporation linked to his family's trust." I covered my mouth. He really was running. Not metaphorically, not conceptually, literally, physically, running from the truth. People around me shook their heads, whispered, pointed. But I didn't feel triumph. I felt the weight of years I hadn't lived, but now inherited. Ava's silence, the other women's terror, the shadow Charles had cast across every corner of our lives. Then the screen changed again. "We also have disturbing developments regarding several sealed cases connected to the Hawthorne family." Daniel's face appeared. He wasn't speaking into the microphone. He wasn't grandstanding. He was handing over documents, files, emails, recordings, to the federal agents, to Maya, to the truth. Footage of him saying only one line. "They deserve justice. All of them." Something in my chest cracked open, not forgiveness, not affection, but respect. The kind born from someone doing the right thing when everything in their bloodline taught them to do the opposite. The trial began 3 weeks later. I had Noah bundled in a soft blue blanket, his breathing steadier after surgery, but his body still fragile. Maya sat beside me in the courtroom, posture sharp, eyes on fire with purpose. A row of women filled the benches behind us, some I recognized from quiet meetings, some whose messages I had read through tears. All of them carried scars carved by the same man. Then Ava appeared. Not in person, she wasn't strong enough, but on a screen. Her hair was thinner now, her voice slower, but her eyes had not forgotten. They trembled as she spoke. "He locked the door. He said the world wouldn't believe me, that he could make me disappear." People in the courtroom shifted, the horror rippling through them like a quake. Ava's voice cracked. "He told me, silence keeps this family alive." Tears blurred my vision. My hands curled into fists. I felt every woman's story stitched into my skin. It wasn't just testimony, it was resurrection. Then the judge asked, "Do you identify the man who harmed you?" Ava's gaze lifted toward the screen, toward the small window where Charles sat between two officers. Her voice was soft but steady. It was Charles Hawthorne. A shiver swept through the room. Charles didn't look at her. He stared straight ahead, jaw clenched, eyes dead. As if the truth spoken out loud was beneath him. But it wasn't. It was crushing him. Finally. One by one, other women came forward, names I didn't know, stories that sounded too familiar. Their voices built upon each other until the weight of them became undeniable. When Daniel took the stand, he didn't defend himself or the family legacy. He spoke like a son grieving a father he never truly knew. He hid everything, Daniel said, and we all let him. I let him. I'm done being the man he raised me to be. When he stepped down, he didn't look at me. He didn't need to. His testimony wasn't for me. It was for Noah, for Ava, for every silenced voice finally being heard. The verdict came after only a few hours. Guilty. On every count. Sexual assault, coercion, unlawful confinement, fraud, intent to flee justice. Each word sank into the courtroom like a stone dropping into still water. When the judge announced life imprisonment, I exhaled a long, trembling breath I didn't even know I'd been holding. It felt like releasing years of fear. Mine, Ava's, theirs. Charles didn't turn around as they led him away in cuffs, but Daniel did. He walked toward me slowly, as if unsure whether he deserved to stand anywhere near me. "Emily," he said quietly. I lifted Noah into my arms protectively. Daniel's eyes softened. Grief and regret tangled inside them. "I'm glad he can never hurt anyone again," he said. "So am I." He hesitated, voice lowering. "I once looked at you to find love, but now, I see my son, and I see the difference between weakness and strength. It wasn't a plea, not a request, just a truth." I nodded once, not acceptance, not rejection, understanding. The courtroom emptied, the noise faded, but for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt something close to peace settling over me. Not because justice was perfect, nothing ever could be, but because the silence was finally broken, and the monster who thrived in darkness had fallen in broad daylight. Healing isn't loud. It doesn't burst open like truth, or collapse like denial. Healing happens in small, trembling moments you barely notice until one day you look around and realize you're breathing differently. The first moment happened 2 days after Charles was sentenced. I was sitting in the hospital recovery room with Noah sleeping on my chest, his tiny fingers curled around the collar of my shirt. His breathing was steadier after surgery. Still fragile, still monitored closely, but alive in a way that felt like a miracle stitched with human kindness. Daniel stood in the doorway. He didn't step in without being invited anymore. That alone said everything about who he was becoming. "May I?" he asked quietly, nodding toward the chair beside me. I nodded. He sat. No grand speeches, no attempts to repair the past with sweeping promises. Just silence filled with sincerity, a kind I had rarely seen in him. After a long moment, he said, "I want to apologize. Not for the trial, not for what my father did, but for what I did, for who I was." I looked at him, really looked, and asked, "Why now?" He inhaled shakily. "Because watching you fight for Noah, it made me realize strength isn't dominance, it's protection. And I failed at that. I failed you. I failed him." A long silence. Not sharp. Not heavy. Just honest. "I don't want recognition," he added softly. "I don't need forgiveness. But I'll be here. However you'll allow me. Quietly. Completely. No conditions." I held Noah a little tighter. Forgiveness was complicated. Not a door you force open, but a window cracked slowly with time. So I told him the truth instead of anything pretty. "I forgive you. Not for you, but for the version of me who needs to let go to move forward." His eyes glistened, but he didn't speak. He simply nodded, grateful without expecting more. That was the second moment healing began. Weeks passed. Noah grew stronger, still medically fragile, still needing checkups and therapy. But his eyes lit up when he looked at me. His fingers wrapped around mine with purpose. His cries were louder, healthier. One afternoon, as sunlight spilled across my new kitchen floor, clean, warm, and nothing like the old apartment, I realized something quietly monumental. Our life was beginning. The new house wasn't big: 2 bedrooms, a small yard, a porch with peeling white paint. But it felt alive. I painted the walls sunshine yellow. I baked muffins with Bernice's recipe, though mine were never quite as good. I let the windows stay open so I could hear the neighborhood kids laughing. For the first time in months, the air didn't feel suffocating. Maya visited often. She wasn't just my lawyer anymore. She had become something like a sister forged in fire. She helped me fill out paperwork for the fund around Noah's name, reviewed the memoir draft I had started writing, and always insisted on feeding me something while we worked. "You don't heal on an empty stomach," she'd say. Bernice became the soul of our small little world, showing up with cornbread, blankets, and laughter loud enough to chase shadows from corners. Ava. Ava was improving. Slowly. Carefully. She wasn't ready to leave the facility yet, but she asked to speak to me during a supervised visit. When I entered her room, she stared at me with wide, timid eyes. It felt like looking at a fragile mirror of who I could have become. "He can't hurt you anymore," I whispered. Tears filled her eyes. "He hurt so many of us." "I know," I said softly. "But you survived. And your voice saved us." For a brief moment, she reached out her hand, a small, hesitant gesture, and I held it. Her grip was weak, but her spirit was astonishing. Healing, I realized, wasn't just mine. It belonged to all of us. Months passed, and I finished the final page of my book, The Child Who Broke the Silence. Writing it was like picking glass out of my skin, painful, liberating, necessary. Every chapter peeled back layers of fear and replaced them with truth. The kind of truth that didn't just expose darkness but illuminated what it meant to survive it. I formed the Noah Foundation a week after the book draft was completed, an organization to support women and children harmed by abuse, silence, and powerful families who hid behind polished walls. Maya became my legal advisor. Bernice became the heart of the outreach. Daniel donated regularly, quietly, anonymously, never wanting credit. Even Ava asked to contribute once she grew stronger. She started painting again, gifting us small canvases filled with trembling colors that slowly steadied with time. Our new family wasn't built from blood. It was built from truth, from survival, from choosing each other. One golden afternoon, I took Noah to the park near our new home. He was able to sit upright in his stroller now, observing the world with wide, curious eyes. His health wasn't perfect, but it was improving every day. As we walked along the path lined with wildflowers, he reached out his little hand. A small, delicate yellow bloom brushed his fingers. He grabbed it clumsily, petals folding under his grip. He held it up to me. A gift. My heart tightened in the gentlest way. I knelt next to his stroller, brushing his cheek. "Thank you, love." His small voice, soft, new, bubbled in response. It wasn't quite a word, but it was enough to fill the entire world. Then he looked at me with those wide, searching eyes and murmured a sound that almost sounded like a question. I answered it for him anyway. "Yes," I whispered. "Mommy's happy." The breeze carried our laughter. The sky felt wider. My shoulders felt lighter. I stood, taking his tiny hand in mine as we continued our slow walk down the path. "You helped me find my voice again," I told him softly. "And now, I finally hear it." The silence that once suffocated us was gone, and in its place was something bright, gentle, unbreakable, healing. Fade out. In the end, justice didn't roar. It didn't arrive with flames or fury. It came softly, like morning light slipping through a cracked curtain. It came through truth spoken aloud, wounds no longer hidden, and the quiet courage of those who refuse to stay silent. My revenge was never about destroying the Hawthorns. It was about rebuilding myself, about holding Noah close and realizing the most powerful vengeance I could ever take was to live a life they could never cage. A life built on choices, mine, on voice, mine, on freedom, finally mine. The monsters fell. But we didn't rise in rage, we rose in healing. And sometimes, that is the most poetic revenge of all. If you've stayed with me through this journey, through darkness, truth, and the slow return of light, then I want to ask you something gently. Which moment in Emily's story made you feel the shift? The moment you realized she would not break, but become someone stronger? Leave a comment. It doesn't have to be long or eloquent, just honest. You never know. Your words might become the light someone else needs to step out of their own darkness.